So the first exercise in the box section is it's very simple. We're using a ruler and we are plotting out a bunch of boxes in 2-point perspective. So use a ruler. Doesn't matter how experienced and skilled you might be, I don't want you to freehand this one in particular. There will be chances for that later. Secondly, lay out your page with rectangular frames. I don't want you to do one composition per page. I want you to split it up. Framing your compositions is generally a very good habit to get into, especially when we start thinking more about illustrations and thumbnailing and stuff like that. Frames are your friend. So frame compositions. And so if you are working in an A4 or 8.5 by 11 inches piece of paper, then you can probably fit a good 3 frames in there. That should be all right. And so we are, like I said, we are just plotting out boxes. So the idea is that you create a horizon line using your ruler. You place vanishing points. And the idea with the, I'm not going to go too in depth with like what a vanishing point is and all of that. This video is meant to be a companion to the lesson to kind of clarify and show me working through the exercises. You're still expected to read through those, and it's all explained there to varying degrees of success. But the idea is that we want to construct our boxes, and both of our horizontal lines will go towards one of these 2 vanishing points. But our verticals will just run straight up and down because, again, this is 2-point perspective. Now, what is a vanishing point? They're basically the building block of 3D space. The main rule is that we all know that two parallel lines will always run side by side, never growing further apart or closer together, and never converging. That's the definition of parallel. But if we take 2 lines that are parallel in 3D space and we draw them in a 2-dimensional piece of paper, that rule kind of gets turned on its head. It goes from parallel lines never converging to parallel lines, in order to be parallel, will converge at a specific point together. So for a vanishing point, for a set of parallel lines, no matter how many lines you have, as they go off to the distance, they will gradually converge to a single point, as long as all those lines are parallel to one another. So in this case, we know that these sides of this box, these 2 lines, are parallel with one another. And if we were to add another one, like this, that converged upon the same point, this will also be parallel to these other 2. So all 3 of these would be parallel. And same with this one here. So we are plotting all of our lines back to, or all our horizontal lines back to the vanishing point. And there we have it, a box. We can increase our line weight a little bit. We have a box, and we can throw together another box. And there is some guesswork. We're not building cubes. Don't forget that. We are not building cubes. We are just building arbitrary boxes of some length, height, and width. And so we are making some guesswork. We're not trying to fit any particular measurement. That kind of thing comes into play in like lesson 7. Well, 6 and 7. So we'll worry about that some other time. So when I'm putting this line down, I'm just guessing. I just want to put it down at any point along these 2 lines. And then I do the same thing. I plot lines from the vanishing point back and forth. And there we go, got another line, and I do the same thing. Oh, that's a little bit off, but yeah. So we keep doing this over and over and over until we fill this page with boxes, and it doesn't matter if they overlap. Eventually it'll get kind of confusing because there'll be a lot of lines floating around, but the point is just draw as many of these as you can. The only other thing that I wanted to mention in regards to this exercise is that where you place your vanishing points matters a little bit. You'll notice that these points were pretty far apart on either side of the horizon, on either side of the page, really. And the reason for that is that the further apart they are, the more room you have to work without running into any distortion. If they're closer together, you're going to end up with distortion much faster. So if I show you here, this box is going to look distorted. And when they get distorted, they start to look very confusing, and it's kind of hard to wrap your head around how you're supposed to draw it. Technically, it's still correct, though. It's just weird. I think it's here. So you end up with a box that's like this. So obviously that's very distorted, and the reason is because it's outside of the vanishing points. So you're to the left of the leftmost vanishing point, but you can also end up with this problem with boxes that are too high or too low. And the way that we can figure out the kind of threshold for that is by drawing a circle that sits on both vanishing points, or rather that both vanishing points sit on. So here, we want to have the circle sit so that its diameter is the distance between the points. And we can draw the circle here. And anything that sits inside of the circle will be safe. You won't have much distortion. You might get a little bit as you get out to these outer edges, but it's generally going to be okay. Anything that sits outside of it gets distorted. So this box for sure. If we look at the top example, we've got this whole circle of safe space, safe area. Anything outside of it would end up getting distorted. So generally you want to keep your vanishing points further out to the side. And that's the gist of it. So basically you're just putting down lines. You start off with a vertical line because you know your vertical lines are always running straight up and down. There's no vanishing point there because of the nature of two-point perspective, which again is explained in the lesson. And then once you've got this, you just start plotting back to your vanishing points and then to both of them, and then guessing more lines until eventually you are guessing the location of your other vertical lines, until you've got enough plotted out to construct a box. Like that. And then you have your back line. You may end up, depending on how accurate you are with your vanishing points, like if you plot, see here, these lines kind of, if you were to zoom in on that, it would look like your point is here, but the lines are kind of going across a little bit off. If you end up doing that, you'll end up in situations where your back line is actually going to be slightly off. Like see here, there's this intersection here and this intersection here. It's just because you weren't being careful enough with your ruler. So I'm obviously being a little bit sloppy and rushed because I'm trying to get through all these videos. So it's not a big deal because you can't usually tell. But just be aware that if you end up having problems with that, that's the reason. And yeah, that's about it.